Yo, 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 what is up, everybody? Chris here from Esports News, Axis Rotation, however the flip you know me in these interwebs. And today I'm going to be bringing you guys something a little bit different from my usual standards, but really interesting to the community at large, I think. I'm going to be talking about OpTic Texas and what they've really struggled to do in the grand finals and why I think they haven't hoisted a trophy yet this season. So, hope you guys enjoyed the intro. Going into Major 4 in beautiful Paris, France, I wanted to really do a deep dive into OpTic Texas, why I think they're struggling, and what I think they can ultimately do to topple some of these other teams going into Major 4 and in the champs as well, right? As you guys can see on the screen, we have a lot of data to dissect. They were 22 and 6 in the online qualifiers, which is absolutely phenomenal. They went 4 and 3 in stage 1. 10 and 1 in stage 2, which is absolutely insane. They followed that up by going 5 and 0 in stage 3, and then they finished the season in this most recent stage 4 qualifier going 3 and 2 with 2 surprising losses. So, in the tournament bracket OpTic Texas, you guys can see they are undefeated. They're 12 and 0. They have yet to lose a single match in the tournament bracket of the 2026 season, which is pretty remarkable, right? So looking at it, there were 9-3-0 sweeps, and then there were 2-3-2 wins, both coming at the Stage 3 Major. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second when I talk about how the difficulty of competition is ramped up as more parity has entered the league, and teams have figured out a lot of their issues that were causing some dysfunction in certain key scenarios. 3-1 against FaZe Vegas, who were the Major 2 champions. There is something to that. You guys know they beat FaZe Vegas. FaZe Vegas came back famously in this same tournament and beat OpTic 4-3, right? So, looking at the minor stages, they were very consistent there as well. They went 1 and 1 in minor 2, only losing to the LA Thieves, the team who also beat them in the grand finals of minor 2. So that brings me to my last point about the actual data and the lurking variables that people are kind of ignoring and disrespecting the parity that we have in this great league. So, lastly, the last thing I will talk about is the grand finals themselves, what's going on, the specifics, etc., and why the green wall meets the pink and red Sunday wall so consistently. So, let's get into it, looking at the slang tax that OpTic pays by entering these grand finals the way that they do, right? Online quals are 22 and 6, 1.04 average KD, 1.02 for Dashy, 1.05 for Hoop the Nuke, 1.06 for the Mullet, Mercules, and 1.02 for Shotzi. So in the tournament bracket, of course, you have a 1.12 average KD for these guys, which is absolutely astronomical. 1.14 for Dashy and Hook, which is unreal considering the fact that both of those guys are like my age and I'm 27. So shout out to Dashy and Hook. They really give me life. 1.09 from Mercules and 1.09 to match from Shotzi. So these guys are absolutely phenomenal on LAN in the tournament bracket, as you guys can see. And obviously, there were a lot more matches played at Major 3, the Pro-Am in Atlanta. So that's where we have 12 matches as opposed to normally at this point in the season we would have about 9 in total. So we got a lot of extra matches because of the pool play from Major 3. So Grand Finals. This is where the big drop off and the big departure happens. You can see there's almost a zero point 0.4 differential between the average KD of the team in the bracket on Friday, Saturday, and early Sunday within the same tournaments, and the Grand Finals, which is just a few hours after their last tournament bracket matchup, right? So you can see there's a big departure from Dashy. He almost drops by zero point 0.5. It's about 0.45 here. A departure of literally zero point 0.5 for Hook. Uh, Pretty big departure from Mercules, and Shotzi not as much. A 0.11 is really not that huge of a departure, especially when the rest of your team, I mean, these guys are dropping off. Their KDs are dropping off by figures of zero point 0.4 and zero point 0.5 in some cases, and almost zero point 0.4 in the case of Merc, right? So that's a very large departure point. And honestly, you can't blame Shotzi for having a 0.11 departure point. It's actually phenomenal that he is almost so consistent. And when you look at his online qual KD, it's only a zero point 0.4 differential. So it's really not that great of a drop off between online and grand finals on LAN for Shotzi. Now, looking at it, when I did a real look and a deep dive into the stats, I also watched some of the highlights, like from the grand finals, just a couple moments, and then I did a Python script and I had it scrape all of the box scores that I have from the season, and I had it just pull all of the data from OpTic Texas specifically and parse it for online, LAN, and then grand finals. And this is what I really made note of. I took some meticulous notes and I had AI summarize it like you see here. So online, OpTic was absolutely unbeatable for the most part. They had a couple losses here and there, a couple series where people caught them with their pants down. Carolina Royal Ravens, different upsets. That's going to happen. Call of Duty Online is very, very unpredictable, especially in this NPC meta with teams making so many changes and just everybody adapting to new maps and the meta being really, really just an equalizer, right? I mean, things are just a lot closer right now. So, farming standard qualifying maps online through structured protocol. They have a very structured and methodical playstyle and approach to the game. OpTic relied on their pacing, and that cushioned their record across these online splits. As you can see, they were phenomenal. I mean, 4 and 3, 10 and 1, 5 and 0, 3 and 2. They always made winners, right? They were always great. Online matches established their structural framework for how they approach the game as OpTic Texas, but it hid minor depth flaws behind sheer gun skill and pacing advantages. They were able to outpace people and outgun people, and we've talked about it a lot in the community. They were able to really just hide some of their bad habits in their successful endeavors, right? As Crim6 and OpTic Legend said, losing is learning and winning is teaching. And OpTic did nothing but teach here and they didn't learn, right? I mean, they had a couple losses. They always rebounded very well from those losses. And that's what they really needed. They needed some losses to really dictate, hey, we need to be more decisive pushing as a team in these scenarios. We need to ease up on this in this scenario, et cetera, right? So looking at the LAN, I think it's a bit of a mirage, right? I think it's a bit deceptive. They played teams like Koi and teams like Riyadh and G2 a lot. G2, as we saw, they blew it the hell up. They picked up Envoy. Astriel's contract expired in the middle of the season. I mean, we'll look at it a little bit more in depth when I look at the major and minor one maps and series outcomes, like an expanded view. But just to briefly touch on that, that's kind of the conclusion I'm going to draw. So, absolute domination on the convention floor before Sunday was the hallmark of OpTic Texas within this season. A run built on 9 clean 3-0 sweeps, proving their top end talent can instantly break standard competition, right? We saw it especially in the series with Koi and Riyadh, where they both started out very hot. Then OpTic, they were like, sit your ass down, So, Unlimited Bot Trap is one that they fall into, and I feel that they've fallen into all season long. By executing teams perfectly in short form BO5 series, OpTic handed the lobby unlimited pristine teach tape without accumulating any protective lower bracket scars. What really catalyzed these wins for teams like FaZe Vegas, like I mentioned before, was their victory over the LA Thieves in the lower bracket. They had a really, really consequential reverse sweep in that Major 2 bracket in Birmingham. And honestly, that's what led FaZe to just unlock O4 and Simp as the best SMG duo in the world at that point, right? O4 was able to just reach a pace that we haven't seen anyone in this season really match since, including himself. I mean, it was just a really, really special moment. And the word momentum, excuse me, has the word moment in it, right? All momentum is catalyzed by key moments, and that's true in sports, and it's true here in esports, right? You see the Knicks, their playoff run was damn near catalyzed by Jalen and Cat figuring out the pick and roll to end the regular season. And then when they went down, they lost to the Hawks in those 2 games. They went on the greatest run in the history of playoff basketball. They won 13 straight. And then they had the greatest comebacks in the history of the finals against the Spurs to win the Larry O, right? So moments do catalyze momentum and they teach teams how to make themselves unbreakable. Sometimes you have to be beaten down, hopeless, and come back. And then it creates that indomitable will in your spirit and you figure it out and you can just never lose again. So, yeah, the Crucible effect is definitely here for OpTic Texas, I believe. The grand final opponents survived elimination crucibles like FaZe's massive reversive sweep or Neptune's historic round 11 clutches. Let's not forget, to get to the Major 1 grand finals, Neptune made a 1v4, 1v3, and a 1v2 clutch, which I did definitely cover in his highlight reel that I posted on the channel as well. So these teams arrived on Sunday battle-hardened and strategically fluid. They came into that grand final. Everybody talks about the fact that, there's a big break. The team that plays losers finals obviously has a series right before grand finals, but how else would that work out? Would you play losers finals and winners finals? That's not possible, right? So there's no way around that. The extended best of 7 format neutralized their standard pacing for on the OpTic Texas side, right? Teams like the Thieves rode the NPC meta and lights out overload control to break OpTic's momentum instantly. So typically OpTic, they would lose the map ones in the grand finals, and it never really mattered in the past, right? Even in the past, they would lose the map ones in the grand finals. They come back and they just weather it out, right? So the final verdict for me was that OpTic Texas didn't simply fall apart on Sundays. I don't think they're breakers. I think they became victims of their own regular season efficiency and success. I think they suffered from success. Going 34-6 across online qualifiers and LAN brackets left them incredibly scouted by all other teams, right? When they reached Championship Sunday, they weren't facing regular opponents. They ran straight into lower bracket buzzsaws that had already recalibrated, patched their internal structural errors, and unlocked an unmatchable degree of mid-series adaptation. Within these comebacks and within a lot of these improvements that these teams made, they figure out how to adapt on the fly in that weekend, in that tournament environment. Every tournament is a fresh start, right? It's 0-0 for everybody going into this LAN with these scenarios. In the current format, right? The NPC is king. We have new maps, and it's hot as hell in Paris. So the guys who have AC and who are, coming into the event well rested, more comfortable, they're going to have a leg up. We don't know who those guys are right at the moment, or if the guys who don't have AC will even be impacted by that, right? It might be the guys with AC getting bopped. So, we never know what the tournament's going to look like until everybody shows up, sits down, and the stage lights come on. And honestly, that's where these adaptations come in, and that's where the losses do benefit these teams clearly when we've seen the team from the winners bracket has not won a single tournament this season, right? So looking at the Major 1 and Major 2 box scores, I think there's some different things that we can glean from this, right? Major 1, early in the game, none of these teams really had too much information on how they wanted to play the game. Early stage, OpTic was still very ahead because they're just a better team in terms of their system that they had from the last year, the roster being, a carryover from last year, and all of their strats largely still working with no information in the game. You can see they beat G2 by 47 points here, 2-round differential and a 1-round overload. I'm sorry, 1-score overload. Destroyed the Paris Gentlemen, the guys who came back to win the final. They looked down and out when they went down 5-3 against FaZe, but that Neptune 1v4, 1v3, and 1v2, it was almost written in the stars at that point, right? Gentlemates came out hot in the map 1, 250 to 158. Then they won 6-5 on Raid S&D. OpTic Texas was able to even it up with the Scar Overload going 4-3 in their favor. And then they were able to win the Exposure HP 251-66. Mates were able to win the Exposure S&D 6-2. OpTic takes the Exposure Overload 4-1. And then, of course, famously, Ghosty wins the round 10 Scar against Bruce in the 1v1. Major 2, they played Koi. Koi were in a very, very rough place. This is the event where Insight had that famous resurgence, if you guys remember. But after this matchup, people were definitely calling for Insight to be dropped, and Koi was put on the chopping block. G2 at this point in time, this is right before G2 had all of that turmoil going into. Well, they didn't have turmoil going into stage 3. They struggled a lot, but obviously they dropped Estriel right before stage 4. So stage 2 and 3, you have to look back in retrospect and say, what was really going on with the G2 camp? Did the players know that Estriel's contract was, not really solidified? Did they know that it was likely that someone would take him? Did that compromise his team? Maybe I'm putting too much into it, but looking back at some of the results, it's kind of like, things make you wonder, right? Especially when this team was not really well tested going into these finals. They beat FaZe Vegas in the winners finals, as you can see, 250-192, 6-4. FaZe Vegas was able to take the Raid S&D, a map that they were decidedly the best in the game at that point in time. OpTic Texas was the only team that could rival them on it, and you can see they took it both times. So they beat them in the Overload on Den, 6-3, a map that FaZe was really good on at the time, and then they belted them on Scar HP, 250-112. Just, they had too much momentum, and they just looked better. But in the Grand Finals, it's a very different story. After FaZe Vegas was able to really get hot in the lower bracket, taking down a red hot Koi with Insight playing up, and Kips and Joe really just being monsters at that point in time, right? They had just kind of unlocked things. They were finally getting comfortable. This was right when they had started getting a little bit comfy with Kips. So FaZe taking them down when they did in the lower bracket was very, very important. And honestly, Koi could have made the finals at this tournament. And based on how things went with OpTic and FaZe, who knows how that would have gone if Koi had gotten hot by beating FaZe, right? Call of Duty is a game that's largely based on, like I said, moments that lead to momentum. So, FaZe Vegas was able to take that moment, beating Koi and then LA Thieves 250 to 184 over OpTic Texas. Texas was able to win the raid S&D, like I said, 6-2. FaZe took the Scar Overload 4-3, a map that they were really good at in this qualifier stage. Took the Exposure Hardpoint 250 to 207, and then they took the S&D on Exposure 6-5. Now, this S&D on Exposure was just a result of a number of clutches from Ambuza and 0-4 in the late game. That was just round by round. There were a lot of clutches and a lot of really close, tense moments. But as you can see, this FaZe Vegas series couldn't have been closer in the back half of it. 3 through 5 couldn't have been closer. One score overload, 43-point hard point, and a one round S&D. Can't get closer to that than that, excuse me. So when you obscure those data points, it's like they were very close, but that all comes down to adjustments, right? You could argue that a one score overload game is a game of adjustments. A 43-point hard point. FaZe has always been good at that. Even last year in Black Ops 6, they were one of the better teams in the clutch, right? In those 50-point hard point games, FaZe typically had a winning record. And then round 11 S&D, this comes down to adjustments and just reading what the other team's been giving you and making really, really decisive calls in that last round, right? It's a one and done. So it's a one and done with a lot of information, though. So looking at the Major 3 and Minor 2 box scores, you can see OpTic in the bracket. They looked amazing at Major 3, starting out really hot against Ethan-led Omit. Ethan was making a name for himself. That was an insane weekend for him. They even toppled the pro team, so Omit was not anything to sneeze at here. They 3-0'd the Heretics. They absolutely bodied them. There was nothing close in this series. Then they were tested by Riyadh Falcons, who coming out of the qualifiers, most people, including myself, thought had a really good chance to take the event. I personally had them winning the event. I thought they would beat OpTic here. I was quite close, but no cigar, right? So the Riyadh Falcons were able to win map 1, Sake Hardpoint, a map that they were really good at the time. Somehow they've fallen by the wayside on that map, but we'll talk about that another day. 6-2 S&D for OpTic Texas, map that, as you could see in the Major 2 finals, they really, really got to be good at in Stage 2. Scar Overload went the way of the Riyadh Falcons. Not really too surprising. Riyadh became one of the better NPC. Well, NPC Overload teams with the Stage 3 and Stage 4 changes. Stage 3 and Stage 4, they were phenomenal in Overload, and they beat a lot of the top teams. So, 250 to 112 on Den HP. Pretty surprising for OpTic to take one of Riyadh's more dominant maps so dominantly, but it just showed how much in control they were after a uncharacteristic loss in the Overload, right? Then they took the S&D on Den 6-3. They followed this up in the winners finals by taking down Koi in a game 5, but they did go down. It has to be, well, didn't go down. It was tied up. They went up 250 to 152 on Gridlock HP, beating Koi pretty decisively here. They lost the raid S&D, a map that they're obviously very good at, as I mentioned a few times before, 6-1, so that was kind of interesting. They won a very close Overload exposure, which is really important for OpTic. Overload has been a thorn in their side in these grand finals. And then in the Scar, they lost it by a 38-point margin, 250 to 212 to Koi. Then they won the S&D 6-5, 6-2, excuse me, to win the game 5. I was getting a little crossed up there. So, in the grand finals, they played the LA Thieves, as we all know, a team that beat them in Minor 1. OpTic Texas, they took map 1. Was this the first map 1 that they had won in the final this year? Yeah, I guess maybe it was. They lost to FaZe. Yeah, this was their first map 1 win in the grand final, first and only so far. LA Thieves, of course, took the raid S&D, one of OpTic's bread and butter, 6-3, so that was a really, really important swing map. 8-3 Den Overload. OpTic is usually a pretty good Den Overload team, so that was really surprising for me to see. They rebounded on the Den HP with an 8-point victory. Couldn't have been closer, right? Then they chained that momentum into a Scar S&D win. This is, of course, the sniper around the world, the dashy clutch, the 1v2 to win the map. I mean, it almost caused seismic, like sound barrier level noise. In the Scar Overload, of course, Neum ran this one 5-4, and then the LA Thieves closes out on Den S&D 6-2. Really dominant closeout from them, so yeah. Riyadh Falcons in Minor 2 beat them 3-0, but this is Riyadh after they'd had a lot of turmoil. Everybody's kind of like, what's going on with these guys? And then OpTic Texas, of course, they 3-0 the General Mates, but this is mates with Neptune right before everything happened, right? So, freebie. Looking at the LA Thieves in the Minor 2 finals, they ran into the same team again, and the LA Thieves, this time it wasn't as close as it was in Major 3. Um, even though Minor 2 chronologically came after Major 3. My bad. I'm getting confused, all. It's been a long season. Anyways, LA Thieves beat OpTic Texas 250 to 104 on the Scar HP. They took the Den S&D 6-1. Then they took the Overload on Den 4-1 to go up 3-0 in the series. One map away from victory. OpTic Texas tried their very best. They beat them on Gridlock by a 2-point differential. Staved off the impending L with a 6-2 on Hasi. And then the Thieves beat them on Scar Overload 4-3. So yeah, it's been a really, really rough grand finals. And a lot of these maps, OpTic was getting really belted. You know, like there were a lot of maps where they just got blown out. 250, 104, 6-1, 4-1. 4-3 is very close. I mean, looking at this one, even 8-3, 6-3. 5-4 is close, but 6-2. I mean, they've had a lot of struggles in these finals. And then let's look at the mates final, right? 6-4, 6-2. This one was close, but 250, 158. 250, 184. Close, close, close. So honestly, I don't think it's a map thing. There's too much variation in the maps that have been played. We've seen 25 different maps played, right? I mean, I think honestly, this is what it breaks down to, right? So in summation, I think this is what it boils down to. There is a paradox. I think there are battle scars on the other team, and then OpTic gives these teams unlimited teach tape, right? As I've said before. So the mates had a trial by fire. They survived an unreal 5-3 round 11 comeback that was fueled by Neptune's clutching of an impossible 1v3, 1v4, and 1v2 to force the round 11. They were down 5-3 to FaZe Vegas, as I said before. They, of course, win Major 1, 4-3 in the Game 7, where they win 6-4 on the Scar S&D. FaZe unlocked 0-4 and Simp by riding the momentum of a pivotal reverse sweep. This unlocked their pacing in a similar way to the New York Knicks unlocking the pacing of Cat and Brunson, the pick and roll of Cat and Brunson, and really unlocking Cat as the primary option for the Knicks team. That really was the catalyst for the Knicks championship win, right? They rode Cat as the
False.
primary option to distribute the ball. They even said it on the podcast with Jalen and Josh Hart. They were saying, we played through Cat and that worked. So that's what FaZe did, and that's what worked for them at Major 2. They played through 0-4 and Simp, and those guys just did their thing. So the LA Thieves' heartbreaking loss to FaZe 6-2 on Raid, whichever major it was. They lost to FaZe in a close game 5 on LAN, but they have been on a 13 series win streak ever since, which ironically puts them one win away from breaking the all-time CDL record that is held by Simp and Atlanta FaZe. So, the second thing, I think the meta shift obviously does not help OpTic Texas. They've had a huge statistical drop off, especially Mercules. So the NPC meta completely caters to the LA Thieves. I think their pacing and their teamwork is just second to none in this meta. Adding Neum to the squad for Kenny early in the season, I think made their overload a lot better, made it lights out. I think they're the best overload team in the CDL right now. And Overload is a swing game in every series, right? That third map is where you can really start the reverse sweep, or in the grand finals, it's where you can really kind of reverse the momentum. By dismantling everybody in the upper bracket, OpTic gives their opponents unlimited VOD to use to prepare to take them down, right? So everybody else has nothing but information to study, analyze, and use to counter them. While OpTic is just kind of flying blind and having to adjust on the fly to guys who are using all of their mistakes to, you know, patch up their game. No matter who they play, if they come through the winners bracket, they have to play someone who lost and learned. That just makes everybody that they play against dangerous. Maybe OpTic needs to drop to the losers bracket and they need to figure out what might go wrong for them. That's maybe how they win the finals. Losing teams get to recalibrate and patch weaknesses safely in the lower bracket. OpTic is forced to make massive structural adjustments in real time under maximum pressure. And that's why you see things start to really, really break down, right? These teams have all stage to look at OpTic. They say, okay, this is how they won this, but this is what I would do to counter that with our team's play style, knowing their tendencies, etc., etc. And they can do that for weeks. So by the time they get to LAN, everybody's looking at OpTic and everybody's ready for them. So, contextualizing the competition is, I think, important to looking at why OpTic has also lost finals. It's not just the fact that they have no room to adjust. People are also playing well, and there's more parity in the league. All these teams are built to take down the defending champs, and it shows, right? While teams like FaZe and LA Thieves were fighting for their tournament lives and catalyzing their approach to the game, OpTic's perfect bracket runs often pitted them against rosters that were fundamentally compromised. Teams like Koi, Riyadh, G2, who had different things going on and just weren't as good or as strong as teams like FaZe or LA Thieves, right? They were sparring with heavy bags while the eventual champions were forged in the Crucible, playing matches against really, really difficult competition. This created a false sense of security that left them critically underprepared for the moment. The General Mates imploded at some point this season. In retrospect, the mates were actively unraveling through most of the season. Following Major 2, deep-seated internal issues fundamentally compromised their roster. Sweeping them in the upper bracket wasn't really a pressure test. It was capitalizing on a team collapsing under its own weight behind the scenes. OpTic farmed the Falcons repeatedly to pad their bracket stats, but Riyadh was plagued with pacing and teamwork issues all year long. Repeatedly beating a fundamentally disjointed team does nothing to prepare a roster for the coordinated strike of an elite Sunday opponent like LA Thieves, FaZe, or Mates after that comeback. So, Toronto Koi struggled mightily both before and after Birmingham. The constant community calls for insight to be dropped, combined with the turbulence leading up to Joe Steve's leaving, meant OpTic was playing a roster completely devoid of confidence and structural identity. So yeah, I think honestly, the difficulty of schedule in the bracket mixed with these other teams catching momentum and OpTic having no real room to make quick improvements as these other teams do by losing series, figuring it out, and then coming back stronger means that it's always going to be kind of random how they perform. That's why you see there's so much variance in their performance in the finals, right? When I sorted by all of the splits, you can see there's a big level of variation between all of the different like finals and then the brackets between the players and the team itself. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it here. I don't want this video to be too much longer. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope you have a great morning, noon, or night. If you enjoyed this, please be sure to share it with someone who you think would also enjoy this content niche. I think OpTic Texas can win, but I think their pathway to winning is going through the losers bracket, patching up their holes, and really gaining some momentum like everybody else. So yeah, catch you guys on the next one. Hope you have a great morning, noon, or night, like I was saying on these videos. Once again, this is Chris from Big Sports News, X Rotation, however, flipping on these interwebs, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.